welcome to Exhuming the Truth. This podcast is dedicated to cold cases, missing persons, systemic injustices, and the art of forensic science that seeks answers when silence remains. My name is Asha Carmody, and I am a forensic scientist and a criminologist, and in each episode, we examine the evidence, the systems, and the human stories that are often left behind. Hi guys, today we have a brand new episode that we have freshly recorded with an absolute legend, if I do say so myself. This gentleman's name is Chris G. He is from the UK. He is a forensic science specialist. He has an incredible background and history. Wait till you hear me give him a little introduction and you're going to have your mouth open like I did. It was very easy to talk to Chris. He is very intelligent, knowledgeable, and just a very down-to-earth person. I hope you enjoy the episode. I know that you will. This is by far one of my favorites, so let's get right into it. Hi guys, today I'm joined by Chris G, a forensic fire investigator with almost 2 decades of experience in forensic science. Chris has worked as a crime scene investigator, a digital forensics team leader, a project manager, and now specializes in fire investigation. He also hosts the Evidence Trail podcast, which maybe some of you are here from listening to that, and want to hear what you have to say about a secret story that you have not yet unveiled. But let's get into it. Welcome, Chris, and also thank you for having me and for jumping on our podcast as well. Do you want to introduce yourself and a little bit about sort of what you've been up to lately?
Yeah, I think you pretty much covered it there. That's my LinkedIn bio right there. It's a good reference, isn't it, to gather information about people LinkedIn. So like you said, for the last 2 decades, I've been involved in forensic science over here in the UK. I started my journey, in fact, before forensic science, as just a pizza boy, just creating pizzas in this little pizza restaurant. And then, I went, I joined the police in the post room, opening letters. It was, a really tedious job, but someone's got to do it, but it was a foot in the door. And then I worked my way up to a forensic assistant. So this being an assistant, I was working in the labs, cleaning the labs, ferrying about evidence. And then the opportunity came up to be a volume crime scene examiner. So a volume crime scene examiner is like a crime scene investigator, but they don't trust you on the big juicy stuff just yet. You gotta find your feet first, which I can fully appreciate and understand. So I would deal with things like burglaries, car crime, criminal damage, that kind of thing. I did that for 2 years, and then for 15 years I was a crime scene investigator. I would go to things from anything from what I've just described, so burglaries and things like that, to your murder cases, sexual offences, fire scenes, which is what I specialise in now, drug factories, firearms, you name it really. And then I kind of hit the ceiling really, and I had for some time as a crime scene investigator, and I just wanted to make the next step up for a while. So you alluded to me being a digital forensics team leader, a project manager. That was me trying to work my way into management, which I did for a little bit, but it just wasn't my calling really. Having been so victim focused for so long as a crime scene examiner, a crime scene investigator rather, where I would go around someone's house and they've had potentially the worst thing happen in their life to them. I always just loved the thought of me going in there, helping them, and not giving them a bill afterwards, that they can just, like say for example, something goes wrong in your house, the boiler breaks or something like that. So you call out someone to come rescue yourself so you can have a hot shower and things, but you get a bill left at the end of it. Whereas I just love being able to go around someone's house, talking to them, make them feel at ease, hopefully get some forensic evidence that will help identify who has done that to them. But then I don't need anything from you. If they gave me a thank you, that would be their payment to me really. A lot of the time I would get a hug and things like that. I'd love that so much. And then when I became a manager, that sort of stopped really.
Yeah, you don't have a lot of hugs in management roles.
No one gives you a hug. No one thanks you.
No.
it's like you've got targets to meet, you've got people to please that are above you in the chain, people to please that are below you, and if you try and do both, you will fail. If you try and do one of them, you will fail. And being a manager, I thought that was always going to be my career path. I needed to work my way up that ladder. And doing it, I was just a shell of the former person that I was. So thankfully, the boss of this company that I now work for, he saw me out on the train going up to London one day, and he just said, "Chris, you look dead behind the eyes. You're a shell of the former person you were." I would have worked with him at fire scenes where he'd get drafted in by the police as a forensic contractor, so a forensic scientist that specialised in fire scenes. And he said, "I've got a job opportunity coming up. Why don't you go for it?" So I did. And I've been with this company for just over a year now.
Wow. That is a very interesting and extensive. And I have to ask, with your crime scene work, was that basically a call out type situation? Like you would kind of have, was it like shift work and you would be called if there was an emergency crime scene and things like that? What's that like?
Yeah, so we would be on a shift pattern. It started off as a 9-day shift pattern, so I would work 3 early turns, 3 late turns, and then have 3 days off. And then that became a kind of rolling, I think, 6-week pattern where it was different every day, where I'd have to check my calendar to think, am I late for work or am I going to be really early if I leave now? But of course, crime happens 24/7. So our early turns would be 8 till 4:30, and then my late shifts, they were originally 3:30 until midnight, but then that changed to 1:30 to 10 o'clock because it was cheaper for them to pay us.
Oh, nice.
And then I'll be on call for a lot of those days. So it used to be I was on call for my first late shift. So that would be an on-call pattern of between midnight and 8 in the morning. I would go home with my phone next to me and just pray that it perhaps didn't ring, because I like sleep, a lot of people. And then it became the workplace became kind of a bit more deserted as staff. We went from having 60 people in the department to about 30, so we pretty much halved our workforce. So that meant that we had to change our shift pattern. So I said going from a 9-day pattern to then a 6-week pattern. We had to do that to kind of fill the gaps in the shift pattern with staff. And then I would do 2 to 3 call-outs a week. And it was becoming a point where, I'd be getting pretty much called out every other week, perhaps. So something would come in, my phone would go, and it could be that, you've got to drive there, while I'm in my pajamas and everything. I'm waking up and people's telling me about this, this is the most important thing that's happening in the county right now. And it's like, I've got to take in all this information whilst I was dreaming about being on a cloud filled with marshmallows.
Wow.
It could be pretty tricky.
Well, when you kind of first spoke about what you were doing and, you were saying that you do like the human side of it, is that kind of what, if you were able to kind of comfort them in a way, did you, in your work that you were doing, were you able to follow the case till the end? Were you able to, know the result of certain cases you were working on and get that follow through? Or was it kind of this is my job, I do the crime scene processing and then I don't know? Because I don't know if I could survive doing that and not having resolution, being on that job.
Yeah, that was a particularly hard part of my job. It was almost like a conveyor belt. So you would come in, you'd have jobs to go to. You get back into the office after you've done them. You write up all your reports and things like that. The next day, more jobs to go to and things. The thing that I quite like about the job that I do now is that where I'm more of an expert than I was as a CSI, we do get to follow the cases through. New information comes up, the police contact me, I do further work on it, and I kind of follow that to court. Whereas as a CSI, I would go there, I would collect the evidence, recover that evidence, and then that evidence would go off to someone else. So it could be that, quite simply, if I get a fingerprint, then it would go off to a fingerprint expert that would examine that fingerprint, determine who it was. I get notified if that was the result or not, but then it would just go cold. I wouldn't be subjected to information from any interviews or anything like that unless I would, ask the detective, basically. That's a particularly hard part of the job, because if I have sat with someone and they've gone through quite a lot of trauma and things, obviously I want to know how their case is going. But of course, I can't dip into a case if I'm just feeling nosy, because the case management systems are monitored. You've got to have a reason to go in there. It was particularly hard. There's also a story about, and a lot of crime scene investigators will tell you, that often you kind of feel a bit forgotten. It could be because you are, say, police staff, you're a civilian as opposed to a police officer. And there was a case that I dealt with, and basically we were called because someone had found footwear marks in their flower bed outside their house. There was no break-in or anything like that, but there was no reason for these footwear marks to be in a flower bed because they had a fairly long garden. On the other side of the window was where their 19-year-old daughter's bedroom was. So I think they contacted police. Nothing happened initially about it because they couldn't really prove that, say, a crime had happened. But what the call handler said was, just rake your garden. If it happens again, make sure that you've got almost perfect soil. So if we do send out someone else, then you've got perfect footwear impressions. And of course it did happen again. I went there to examine the footwear marks, and there were some fantastic footwear marks there. But unless you know who's wearing that shoe, it's not going to identify someone. I looked at the window and I could see a lot of kind of greasy marks that were on the window, basically from someone's sweaty hands, where they were perhaps cupping to look through for a better view. So cupping around. I'm cupping as if people can see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
This is a podcast. I've got to remind myself.
Yeah.
So
descriptive.
Covering your eyes with your hands. That's it. So you can see through windows, and perhaps putting his forehead up against it. So I swabbed these marks. Fingerprinted the window, didn't get any usable ridge detail, so the ridge detail needs enough characteristics in it to form an identification. Didn't find anything like that, but before I powdered the window I got these swabs. We sent off the swabs and they came back as a full DNA profile on someone, a male in the area. When that male was arrested, he was arrested and he had women's underwear in his pocket. The reason I'm telling you this story is that I bumped into that call handler and he said, "Oh, Chris, I remember you dealt with that case. There's an award ceremony in a few days for that case because we identified that person. I'll see you there." I was like, "I've got no idea what you're talking about." And they were having a big award ceremony for this case that they've identified this peeping Tom who'd been going around the area doing loads of them. And I wasn't invited.
Oh my God.
And I thought, if you took out my role in that investigation, you wouldn't be having this award ceremony.
That's unreal.
And as you can see, that happened many, many years ago, and I've gotten over it completely.
Yeah, he says as a tear rolls down his face. Yeah.
I scream every
Oh
night.
my God. Yeah, because I would imagine that's something that I think about a lot with people who did what you did for work. I started, in this industry, particularly to find answers for people. I can't just be fingerprinting something and walking away. So actually doing that and knowing that you got resolution and then there being awards for it and then not getting that award, that's heartbreaking. That's hard. That's hard. And
I didn't need an award. That's not what this is about. It's not about that recognition, because I go to many crime scenes and sometimes you would never get a thank you, particularly, if, say, the person isn't there at your crime scene. You do it and your thank you is that sense of purpose of what you're doing in a way. But it was the thought that everyone else was getting an award and I wasn't.
Wow. Yeah, you were part of that, and that's what's also hard, I think, a lot of the time when people are they want to work in forensics, but they see, there's actually so many roles along that line and very little professionals get to see it through from beginning to end. And it's often, the forensics is often the hardest part, collecting the evidence, preserving the evidence, and, getting as much as you can. I just can't imagine, that would have been so heavy to carry. Like, I've just seen this poor woman and I hope she's okay, and never knowing, a final. So it's like watching the unsolved mysteries on Netflix and never knowing what happened. That's hard.
Yeah. And I think with forensics a lot, particularly what CSIs do, is it is the beginning of then the investigation. So if you don't collect the evidence, if you leave a stone unturned or something like that, then what then follows is then influenced by what you do initially. And it goes back to that case, if I didn't do what I did, didn't spot those marks, then they wouldn't have been having this award ceremony afterwards. And I think because cases can last for so long, perhaps people forget about those initial stages, really. It obviously takes incredible detective work over sometimes many, many years to get that person, either convicted or exonerated if that's where you're going with the case. But, people in the early stages can often be overlooked.
Yeah.
I'd say to, any detectives, don't forget about those people.
Well, from your experience, I know, it happens a lot everywhere, but there's a current case in Australia which you may or may not have heard of, and it's a disappearance of a 4-year-old boy, Gus Lamont. And they were very remote in Australia. What you would picture... Have you been to Australia?
I haven't,
no. What you would picture Australia to be if you haven't been here. So, very vast desert, on a sheep station, very outback. The closest town is 45 minutes drive. They're in the middle of nowhere. This young boy's gone missing. And that happened in September last year, and it wasn't until a week or so ago that one of the grandparents spoke on TV about it. We hadn't really heard from the family at all. And something that stood out to me was when they said that they believed that there were tyre marks or tyre impressions on the station. However, those were ruined when the police came and drove up the same road. Have you got any kind of experience or stories where you've gone in to collect evidence, but maybe there had been ambulance or paramedics or something come in first that you kind of had noticed that maybe some evidence had been kind of ruined, I guess, in a way, by another person or another professional?
Yeah. It was my first ever murder case that I dealt with. I was fairly new to the job. And what we had, there was a victim that was lying in a hallway. He was covered in blood and the scene was covered in blood. The image still haunts me, not only of him, but of the amount of those little yellow numbered markers that I had put around him. Because all of those were footwear marks in blood. Obviously, preservation of life takes precedence over anything that I'm going to do. So if there is a chance that this person can be saved and rescued, then of course, I'd say paramedics, fire rescue service, police officers, do what you need to do and don't worry about that. But what happened in this case was, I think a police officer went round and then called for assistance, which obviously is the right thing. But then I think lots of people turned up and walked all over this crime scene. So what I then had to do was, I think, deal with 100 footwear marks in blood in this small confined hallway. A lot of them were going to be emergency personnel's, but I wasn't to know at the time. And so, I had to deal with all these footwear marks, record them, and then we had a chemical enhancement treatment that would treat basically any later marks to basically increase the presence of that mark by using, if it's been left in blood, basically. So I had to then do it all again. So I think I had over 200 exhibits.
Wow.
Just of these footwear marks in blood because of all that interaction. So I'd say that, if you are going into a crime scene, you're walking into a crime scene, make sure it's for a purpose, basically.
Yeah.
Not just for, a little nose or something like that. but yeah, that can be really frustrating, can't it? We often have what we call a CAP, a common approach path, and that is where we would approach a scene using the route that the offender is less likely to take. So if you know, say, someone has driven in and out through, a certain area, then you would make sure that you park your cars away and then approach it from a different area. Same with, like someone walking up to someone's house. If you know that they've broken in through the back window, then maybe entering through the back door isn't the best idea. You could use the front door. In other situations, there might be an offender has knocked on the front door, so then you would use another door to make sure that you are preserving all that evidence that is on the door.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people think, I could just put on a pair of gloves, that's fine. But it's like,
no.
DNA is so sensitive.
Yeah.
If the one thing you can do better than wear a pair of gloves and touch something is not touch something at all.
Exactly. Yeah. So, yeah. How frustrating, because I have sort of dealt with a few cases with similar things, but it's never, I suppose, intentional, like we have to highlight, because like you said, if you can preserve a life, then by all means that's our priority. It does not make your job any easier, nor the people in the lab who are doing 5 million analysis on one thing. Another thing here in Australia that obviously is everywhere in forensics is blood pattern analysis, but you have to actually specialise in that here. And it's a whole other avenue. I did a little bit of it, enough to kind of get the gist. Is that a specialist avenue in the UK, or is that included in what you kind of were taught to do for crime scene investigation?
It's funny you should bring up blood stain pattern analysis, because it was just a passion of mine as a CSI, so much so that I funded 2 training courses myself. I went over to the Netherlands, to the Netherlands Forensic Institute, the NFI, and did my course over there. And then I did a course over here with 2 scientists, Joe Millington and Gillian Leake. They are sort of ex-Forensic Science Service, BPA experts. Because I just had a real interest in it. But unfortunately, where that kind of career path stopped for me was to get signed off. So the International Association of Bloodstain Pattern Analysis, the IABPA, you can see why they're now. I can't even say it. They kind of stipulate the minimum criteria. You need to be a competent examiner. And where I was the only one that was doing this in my force, I had no one to kind of peer review what I was doing, to make sure that I am kind of reporting it in a kind of competent way. That's where it kind of stopped for me. But you do have forensic service providers here in the UK. We call them biologists here. So if you need a biologist, you would ring up your forensic service provider and say, I've got this crime scene, there's a lot of blood, and I would benefit from a biologist to come over and interpret this blood and tell me, a sequence of events, perhaps what's happened. Then that forensic service provider would send someone down. So that's kind of the approach that we have in the UK.
That's amazing that you went to the Netherlands and studied that, because it is something that I really enjoyed when we did it, and I have used that knowledge then in other cases. But it is definitely something that needs, there's definitely room for more knowledge. Once you think you know something, I feel like it's one of those things where it's like you don't know enough. There's so much that you can learn from that. So it's interesting that you say that, and a lot of people listening, same with your podcast, would be interested in forensics and criminology, and I can give all my advice. But you had a different pathway to me. You started, like you said, in the post room. Was it always your intention to get to that forensic level? Was that your ultimate kind of goal?
Yeah, it was, to be honest. I think going into the police, I'd always wanted to do that, to end up in the forensic department. And one of the reasons why I do this podcast is I had a next door neighbour called Sharon. I doubt she's listening, but Sharon, if you're listening,
hi Sharon.
Because Sharon, when I was growing up, I was a youngster and then a teenager. She was living next door to me. She was a normal person. She had her other half, her child. had a car parked outside her house, and she was a crime scene investigator. And I thought, oh, she's a normal person with all these things, but she's a crime scene investigator. That's so cool. And she really gave me the kind of encouragement to think, well, I can do it too. And I think the reason why I do this podcast is that not everyone has a Sharon. I could be that
I'm
Sharon.
the Sharon. You should have just called it Sharon. Yeah.
I should have, yeah. And yeah, I kind of thought that there are people out there that, they know that forensic science is a thing. But like we spoke about on my podcast, people's view of forensic science might only be of TV, this fictional thing where they kind of think, I've got to be a genius to do this. Sorry, Sharon, but you're not a genius. But you are incredibly clever.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just kind of gave me that inspiration to think, I can do it.
That's so cool. I love that story of neighbourhood Sharon. Good on her.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I kind of got into the police thinking this is really what I wanted to do. Just knew that I had to work hard at any job that I had. So you mentioned, I got a job in the post room. I was going to open those letters better than everyone, That was my role. I've got to do that because, I'm gaining good experience in the police, experience then I can then give to my next interview.
Absolutely.
And it's all about, if we're a video game character, it's all about levelling up.
And like you're so right though. It doesn't matter like what you're doing. If you're showing like persistence and resilience through each job, like your life experience is invaluable, like in any job, particularly in this one. Like this takes, a pretty thick-skinned person, I tell people. So opening the letters better than anyone else. I love that. I love that so much. I just picture you just like opening them perfectly, like no. But I'm really interested to hear you talk about fire investigation. I think that is so cool. And what does that involve? Talk me through fire investigations in regards to forensics.
Yeah. So it's basically what I like to think that I am is this is going to be the closest job that I can physically do to being Indiana Jones.
Oh, cool. Yep.
So so what I would do at a fire scene is I would do like an archaeological dig to remove kind of top layers of the scene and work my way down to that bottom layer. I make it sound really simple, but when you have, say, like a 2-story building, the roof has collapsed and it's all come down, you have then got your top layer is likely to be your roof tiles, and then underneath that is your ceiling joists, and then you've got the contents of first floor, and then you've got floorboards. Wow. You can see where I'm going. But even if it's just a simple compartment fire where you haven't lost what's necessarily above, you're still going to have, say, plasterboard from the walls that are going to come down, picture frames, perhaps part of the ceiling. And what I would do is, say, excavate those areas to remove that debris in order to establish what is there underneath. And it's not always about, say, like your area of origin. It can be finding evidence that is, say, what else is in the scene. You might have a particularly bad area burning in one corner of the room, but then you might have the petrol can with someone's DNA on it in the other corner of the room. If you don't excavate and you're not able to see the whole room, then I'd say you haven't fully excavated, really. And of course, evidence that is away from the fire is going to be less subject to, say, like degradation. I can never say that word.
I know
degradation
what you mean.
Of like your DNA. Yeah,
Yep.
Thank you. If you do a transcript on this, the transcript is just going to shrug your shoulders.
I'm tempted to just leave it and see what it says.
Yeah. But yeah, you wouldn't have that degradation of DNA away from your area. I'll give it another go. Away from your area burning. So yeah, I think often that important information is sometimes forgotten. But yeah, essentially I'm looking for like the hottest point. What has been burning the longest in a fire scene? If we've got, say, a particular low level of burn in the scene, then that would suggest that that is more likely to be an area of origin. It could also be, say, from drop down. So, say, for example, if the curtains catch fire as a result of fire spread and then they drop down, that can cause a low area burning. So you've got to take that into consideration. However, if you have a particular low burn, then that is an area that needs investigation, because fire travels upwards. You get this convection plume where heat and smoke rises. It gets to your top layer of your compartment and then it spreads outwards. Once it gets to that top layer and it's got nowhere else to go, then it starts to come down, and that's where your smoke will go lower and lower. And that is sadly what kills people a lot in fires, is not necessarily the flames, the heat, but it is the smoke inhalation.
Yeah.
It's a kind of common misconception, say in Hollywood and things like that, where you have two characters having a battle in a fire scene that's filled with smoke, and that battle, lasts for like 10, 15 minutes. First Spider-Man film, if you watch that.
Yeah. I was just thinking.
Peter Parker, Tobey Maguire, with the Green Goblin, and they're having a battle in this smoke-filled, fire-enraged house or wherever they are in. I know they're both wearing masks, but they don't seem like the kind of masks.
They're not appropriate masks, I don't think. Yeah.
No. So that scene would have been over very, very quickly, realistically. It is and part of what the work I do as well is to look at where the smoke travels. So could that fire have endangered anyone else in the building? So if it is an apartment block, then I would look to go into other apartments to see if smoke has travelled. Also, if smoke has gotten into any escape routes, then any smoke in those escape routes would put those people in danger of fire. And I think that's kind of a common thing that perhaps is forgotten in forensic investigations as well. It's not necessarily the victim that has been involved in that fire per se, but then it can also be all those people that are trying to escape. You could have had further victims, and how are they endangered as well? And that's part of my role as well, is just to determine who could have been endangered by the fire also. Yeah,
so this is so interesting. I could literally talk for hours about this, but I won't force you to sit here for hours. But in terms of obviously if you're recovering evidence from a fire scene, for example, and you're trying to, like you were saying, locate, I suppose, where the fire started or how it started, what kind of evidence that you have personally recovered from a fire scene were you like is kind of shocking to find? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's rare that something would survive the fire. I know, like, obviously majority of things would burn, but have you ever been to a scene where you're like, I can't believe that, like, I'm able to recover this piece of evidence in here? Or is that kind of not very common in fire investigations?
Yeah, no, it is. I'm always amazed when I find something absolutely tiny. So, for example, like a match. You think a match, they're designed to burn.
Yeah.
Aren't they, matches?
Yes.
When I find a single match, in a load of debris, that's always a self-pat on the back. Well done, Chris.
You got a match.
Such a small item. Recently as well, I found a tiny, tiny spring, and it was the spring that you get in a lighter.
Wow.
And then that led me to excavate further along and find the kind of like metal component for the lighter. We call it the lighter shroud.
Yeah.
The presence of that indicates that there was a flaming ignition source.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for three main things when investigating a fire. I'm looking at the probable causes that it was caused by either a flame, a smouldering source, so perhaps like a cigarette, or an electrical source, including, say, like a battery source as well. The presence of a lighter would then mean that I can't discount that this has been a flaming source, because there has been a flaming object in an area burning. And then I would perhaps look to investigate more hypotheses. So, was the person a smoker? What type of cigarettes did they smoke? Manufactured cigarettes will set smouldering fires far more than your roll-up ones.
Wow.
I've never been a smoker, but if you picture, you're holding a hand-rolled cigarette, if you stop smoking that cigarette, you see people continue to keep lighting them. They just naturally kind of go out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm not a smoker either, so it's interesting.
No. Whereas your manufactured cigarettes, the manufacturers obviously want them to continue to burn, because if you're not smoking them and they continue to burn, then you're more likely to reach for another one.
Yeah.
A lot of cigarettes now, because they are a fire hazard, a lot of the companies have stopped doing that, but you can get some manufacturers that are kind of illegal in this country that, they will continue to burn like that. So that's got to be something that we've got to be aware of. And then I'd be looking to determine whether or not there's any electrical sources in our area of origin, and if there are there any faults with those? So it's not necessarily something I could tell you at the scene. It would be that those items have to be taken away to a laboratory and examined to determine whether or not there were any electrical faults.
Is it common, you've obviously been to many crime scenes, but would it be common for somebody to ignite a fire to conceal evidence? Or are you attending more, accidental fires or, deliberately lit but not to conceal fires? I think here we get a lot of people light their vehicles on fire and be like, oh, someone stole my car and lit it on fire, and then claim insurance. But are you actually getting, a few cases where people are like, I'm going to burn this place down and no one's going to find evidence?
Yeah, I've had a few of those in my career where, it could be like a burglary go wrong and people have set the fire to destroy that evidence. There was one that I dealt with that, it was a couple of weeks long, this case. Sadly, the person had been robbed of his home. He'd been tied up, beaten so badly that he died of his injuries.
Wow.
And then the people, I think, came back and just burnt the house down before he was found. We didn't know if we had a job at the time because, fires conceal a lot, they destroy a lot. We knew we had a body in there. It wasn't until we turned him over and saw that, his hands were bound, his feet were bound, that we thought, we've got a proper job here. A lot of the fires that occur, you probably get more accidental fires than deliberate fires, but if the fire service deem it accidental, then it doesn't escalate to the police, and the police will only contact me if they have, say, a suspicious fire, or a fire that has, endangered a lot of people, and there's potential for, a big claim or something like that.
Would it be a case where, hypothetically, I've literally not gone, I've written you so many questions and I've not asked you any of them. This is just now my personal interest that I'm asking these. But hypothetically, if there was a wildfire in a bush and they thought it could have been deliberately lit, would they then engage with you to come and try and determine that?
I guess so, yeah. I haven't personally had any wildfires. I've had fires that are in woodlands and things like that, but haven't necessarily spread.
Okay.
But part of my training is to look at sort of the areas in which it has started, and then it's no different to, I guess, a scene that I would go to where I'm walking into, say, a room and trying to work out the area in which it started, and then once I've found that area, you think, right, now this is where my work is going to be revolving around, and then I've got more work to do there. So if it is a wildfire, I perhaps look to determine where that has started, and that will probably be a lot of work on any kind of satellite footage, drone footage, things like that, looking at, I guess, the path and trees, what part of this tree has gotten hotter than the other part, and it's almost like a follow that arrow of, worse damage that's pointing you in the direction of perhaps where it started to where you've got that worse damage and worse area burning.
It's so interesting.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It's so interesting because there's just so many scenarios, and so many pieces to that. Not just, I think a lot of the time people think what accelerant somebody might have used or whatever, but there's just so many layers to it. And I think it's a very interesting kind of, are there a lot of people who do fire investigations? Is this a big thing?
So forensic fire investigators that are on call for forensic service providers in the UK, there are 5 of us.
Wow.
5 of us, and we cover basically England and Wales we cover. You've got a lot of fire investigators in the country that work for your fire service.
Yeah.
So they have like local fire investigators, and we have some forensic service providers that will mainly work with insurers to determine the origin and cause of those fires, to basically work out whether or not this insurance company is going to pay out or not. But as far as I'm aware, that forensic scientists like myself in the UK that are on call for forensic service providers, I'm only aware of the 5 of us.
That's very cool. It's very niche, because a lot of the time I know in different countries, for example, in America, they don't really necessarily specialize. It's kind of like forensic science services there covers everything. But, like we've spoken about, BPA is a specialty that you've got to really pursue. Things like this, very interesting. And I want to know what the contrast has been like for you personally. You were so hands-on at crime scene, and now you're kind of doing digital forensics. What's that contrast like? Like, what are you finding any sort of balance in like digital work as opposed to kind of being woken from your slumber and driving down to your crime scene? What's the difference like for you?
So when I joined the digital forensics team, I was there for 8 months, and that was to gain management experience there.
Right.
It was very different to going out, seeing a different place every day, being face to face with the victims. As a CSI, to then be working in a digital forensics lab. My role was to manage the people who were working on cases involving indecent images of children and things like that. So that was particularly difficult. My team are they're an incredible team, incredibly professional and things like that. And I just think anyone that's doing that job, it's just a job that I couldn't do really. I was more managing them than having to do it. But
I think it definitely takes a very mentally strong person to do that role. I know I personally would not have survived 5 minutes doing that. So it's funny the things that you can cope with and that you can't. Did you find before you kind of got a taste for what it's like in CSI, were you like analytical by nature, or did you become more so that way when you started realizing there's like procedure in, crime scene investigation?
Yeah, I think I'd always been a problem solver.
Yeah.
So I always liked solving whatever problem I had in front of me, particularly maths. I always loved maths when I was growing up, and then I did it at A-level. And it was just, it was fascinating to be like, right, okay, we've either got these numbers in front of us and you need to come to a conclusion, or we've already got the conclusion and you need to work out the formula to come to that. I always really enjoyed that. I don't know how, looking back at what I was like as a kid, how I ended up in the career I have, because I always hated horror movies, even Jurassic Park. As a family, we'd have Jurassic Park on the telly, and I would be hiding behind the cushion. When the T-Rex comes down and pulls the guy off pulls the guy, and I was the eldest child as well, and I was the one that's hiding behind the cushion. I was just scared of absolutely everything. But then I don't know quite how I came to the point that I am.
Sharon.
But I guess yes, Sharon.
Sharon did it. Sharon. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think a bit like you, I don't know, I don't know how else to describe it really, but I kind of see like me, my body and what I do, and when I'm there at scene, I'm there doing something so someone else doesn't have to. So, I can experience kind of like trauma right in front of me and things like that. But I just build up that strength somehow, just thinking that, what I'm doing there is preventing someone else from having to do this, someone to see this. And I've had a few cases like that, particularly like with children, where no one is exposed to what I'm about to see and do, because I kind of don't want them to, and in a way I'm sort of doing it so they don't have to. And just afterwards just have to make sure I look after myself really.
Yeah, that, like, you're right. And I feel, I don't know if you might be the same, but I feel my work, it gives it like a different layer of purpose in a way. So when you have that, you're able to kind of detach from yourself and minor things going on, and you're able to be resilient and kind of persist through difficult things like that. Do you feel that in a way?
Yeah, 100%. The worst I ever feel at a scene, the closest I've ever come to fainting is when I was at a post-mortem once, and I've been to many post-mortems before this, but this one I was just feeling really, really queasy at. And this was on like a training course that I was doing. So it was like my training from becoming a volume crime scene examiner to a crime scene investigator, doing that transition. And we literally just had to stand there and watch as this pathologist, worked on this deceased person. And because I didn't have a lot of tasks to do, because I didn't have a list of things that, in my head, I'm like, right, I need to do X, Y, Z. I'd be packaging the exhibits that the pathologist is doing, or I'd be taking photographs and be like, right, this is the next photograph that I need to take. And even just looking at something through a lens is different to looking at something in real life. I think there's a bit of research behind this about why people that are journalists in war-torn countries, why they keep on getting shot, whereas other people aren't. And I think if you're looking down a lens, you're less likely to determine danger and threat than if you are looking through it with your eyes.
Yeah, like experiencing it.
Me, that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? There must be some kind of like psychology behind it, because as soon as you said that, we had, I remember years ago when we did our first cadaver lab, half of the class was gone before it started because they all fainted or were sick or whatever. And I remember thinking, guys, like, you signed up for this. Like, what are you doing? But after talking to them afterwards, they're like, I know, but we hadn't actually started the class yet. We hadn't been given instructions, or, we were going to be taking organs out and learning a lot about anatomy. But because they hadn't started anything, they were like, oh, my God, where am I? Because it's so abnormal. All of the things that we do, and, like, the scenes that you will have seen are so abnormal that you almost do have that. I find it to be a bit of a coping mechanism as well, psychologically, where you're like, I have a job to do, and like that comes first, and then it's not until you sort of walk away where you're like, damn, like this actually happened to a person.
Yeah
Exactly
that. It's not until sometimes you get in your car to drive home that you think, oh my goodness, what have I just done? Like, if I write down on paper what I've just done and then read it back to myself, I'd be like, it's unbelievable in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you heard much about, like, I talk about it a lot on my podcast about the CSI effect and how people watch a lot of shows like CSI and they just expect everybody to, use luminol and solve a crime. What do you have to say about that from your personal experience?
I'd say that probably the hardest thing for me when I know people have watched CSI and then I go round to their house, is the expectations that, you're going to be the one to solve the case. CSI is coming round. I've watched, say, 25 episodes per season of CSI. They solve it every single time. So it's hard to manage their expectations when I say I haven't been able to recover, say, any fingerprints from the point of entry or anything that they've touched. Could just simply be because someone's wearing a pair of gloves or the surfaces that I'm examining aren't suitable for fingerprint powders. But even that, people think, well, they can get this, forensic evidence of this material on CSI, so why can't you?
Yeah.
A common example, I think it was perhaps one of the first episodes of CSI, where a CSI said the person's fingerprints were all over the steering wheel. And I don't know if ever you've seen a steering wheel, Asher, but they're not smooth at all. They are kind of leathery, they've got ridges to them and things like that. But even if they were completely smooth, you're just smudging your hands all over them the whole time.
Yeah.
You don't leave that.
You're not like finger tipping.
Yeah. You're much more likely to get DNA from a steering wheel than you are fingerprints. because of the kind of nature of that kind of rough surface. With fingerprints, you need a kind of completely smooth surface to get a really decent mark. You can get fingerprints off of, say, like treated wood and things like that, but it just becomes a bit more tricky. Best surfaces are going to be like glass, UPVC, surfaces that are nice and flat like that.
Yeah, I definitely relate to what you're saying, because there's a lot of, tests that can be done and still not give a result or the result you're after, or a definitive result even. When you were learning all of the different types of like latent collection, I suppose, at a crime scene, what was like, did you come across any kind of testing method or preservation method that you're like, this is cool, like I like this?
Yeah, I mean, there was one method that someone showed me once that is kind of frowned upon, and you'll probably guess
Am
why.
I going to frown? Yeah.
So moisture would often bring out fingerprints a lot better. If I'm powdering something and then I would add moisture by huffing on it, then often that can develop the fingerprint a lot better. But you can see the problem with it.
Yeah.
If you're going around huffing on your whole crime scene, then if you get any DNA profile, it's likely to be yours. I don't necessarily have a problem with that huffing technique if you know that you've done all the DNA work beforehand. So if you know that you've exhausted all the DNA possibilities that there are, then you can do that. However, sometimes if you have a partial fingerprint and that person has put a bit of pressure on, and you develop that, then you could say swab that mark as well as fingerprint it to look at your skin cell DNA that's been passed over. So the last thing you want to do is contaminate that as well. So I would tend to refrain from that for like major crime cases. But if I've got, say, volume crime scene investigations where we're not going to go down that level of detailed examination, then I would do that there. But also, you've got to be mindful that you do look a bit silly going around huffing on everything.
I was picturing
it. You've got to let the homeowner know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Like, please turn around.
Yeah.
Do you think that
it looks like I'm making out with your window.
Yeah. Do you think that your career has, like, in a way or in numerous ways, like, changed the way that you live life outside of work at all?
I'm probably a lot more conscious about crime, I guess. I know when I first started, I hadn't been subjected to any crime other than what you see in the media.
Yeah.
And you don't really realise just how many, say, like burglaries, robberies, things like that just happen. It got to the point where I felt a bit overwhelmed because I then started thinking, well, everyone I walk past is either a rapist, a murderer, a burglar, or things like that, because that was all I was subjected to every single day, was all the bad things that happen. But I sort of got to a point where I talked myself out of it, because I would go to, say, a burglary and then maybe another burglary and then another one, and the same person has committed all three burglaries, but I'm going to 3 different people's houses and they're all just lovely, normal people that, are just shining lights of society. So I refocused my attention on those victims of crime as opposed to suspects. And as I'm sure you find with like charity work, people are willing to give up and volunteer their time to do good and things like that. And it's those kind of stories that, I like to focus on as opposed to the offender stories and who they are. I'd much rather focus on the victims and who they are.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I think I was in that frame of mind too initially, because you're like, wow, there's so many bad things happening. But that it takes seeing that to see that we've got more good people, and it's hard to see that sometimes when you just watch the news. But when you're actually doing the work, there are, like, yes, a lot of the time the good people are the victims. However, I've noticed from running the charity how many people just genuinely want to help, and not help like monetary wise. Like, they want to dedicate their time, which is like the most sacred thing somebody could give up for another person. They're willing to give you their time to help in any way they can. And there's so many people that are like that. So I'm glad you said that, because yes, like, there's these horrible crimes and like we can do what we can to prevent it. But it's important that people know that there are like tenfold good people out there. They might just be a little bit quiet and you might not have had a chat yet, but they're out there. Like, there's a lot of people willing to help. And before I go, because I've nearly held you hostage for an hour, two things, actually. First thing is, do you remember your story that you were going to tell me? Because I need that. Yeah, good. Okay, tell me that.
Yes, I do. That story I was going to tell you was basically, I got a knock at the office door one day. This was back when I was a crime scene investigator. And a detective was there, and she was holding an evidence bag. And she said to me, I've been given this cold case by, like my sergeant. I've just come back on from maternity, and he just wants something to keep me busy. So he kind of gave her this cold case as a way of, breaking her back into police work after being off for a year, but probably didn't have high expectations that this was going to be solved. And I was like, right, we'll do everything that we can. What are you holding there? In her evidence bag was another bag. And she started telling me the story about this bag. And this bag was found in the woodlands next to like skeletal remains. And it's the only thing that they then had recovered other than the bones themselves. They'd done DNA work, I think, on the bones, but just couldn't get a decent profile. And so this had completely, gone cold, this case. So we opened up this exhibit bag, and this was the first time that it had been opened. And we were just, picking out all the soil, the leaves, the snails, everything that had been connected with this bag that had been there for however many years. And just looking at the contents of what this person had next to him. And there were various items. I think there was, like a glasses case, but there was this old rusty key, this single key, and you couldn't make out any details on this key at all. And I kind of had this brainwave of, we have vehicle examiners dotted about in the police that will examine vehicles to determine the stolen parts. So they will look at them in closer detail than what your normal CSI would do, to look for your VIN number, so your vehicle identification number. So these numbers will be different to your license plates, and they will be unique to that vehicle. It's harder for criminals to impersonate and change these VIN numbers than it is your normal license plates. But some offenders will scratch out, any stamped and engraved VIN numbers. And these kind of vehicle examiners use acetone to wear down any scratchings to the VIN number to then work out what it was originally. I think acetone is more commonly known as nail varnish remover.
Yep,
like
that's
that.
right. Yeah.
I'm going to claim that's apparently. I don't know that
yeah.
for sure. But,
yeah, right. Sure, okay.
with the caveat that I'm a girl dad, remember?
Yes, so. Saved.
Yeah, and I thought, well, it often will clean up rust and things like that, particularly, say, like after a fire as well, you can use it. So I thought, why don't we just give this key a go to see if there are any markings on this key? And some keys have serial numbers on them. So we did just that. We cleaned up this key using acetone, and it looked almost brand new. And this had been in the ground, we later found out, for 18 years, this key.
Wow.
So it had fully rusted. And lo and behold, on the back of this key was a serial number. So we traced the serial number with the manufacturer of the key. So we got that information as well from the key itself. And the manufacturer said, yeah, we sold this key. We got a record of it, and we sold it or gave it to a housing association in London. So we then followed up the lead with the housing association, and they said, yeah, that key belongs to that communal door in a block of flats. And with some good investigation work by this person, this detective, she was able to find out that there's a missing person at this block of flats, or registered at this block of flats. And lo and behold, yeah, the family had ties to where this person was found. So I think they'd moved away, but this was kind of like where the person would spend a lot of their childhood. So I think they travelled down from London to Sussex, where I was, which is like an hour's drive or something, to go back to their kind of final place. There was no kind of obvious injuries to them, so I think we suspected that it was like non-suspicious. But I mean, there are a few reasons why I love this story. One of them is that we were able to give that family closure. They've been searching for ages.
18 years, that's insane.
Their loved one. Yeah. But also, you had a person that was on maternity that was given this case just to keep them quiet whilst they get back into it, and it ended up being, they ended up solving it almost straight away.
That's fantastic.
And this is why I'm so passionate about equal opportunities for people, particularly in forensics, because you get a lot of females in forensics. And I think that things like maternity and things shouldn't stop people from doing this job. Because if it did, we would lose a lot of good people, particularly for the men that are in the career as well. When I joined, there were a lot of, I call it the old boys club, that have had the opinions that women shouldn't be doing the job. And I think that's very, very old-fashioned. And like I said, we would lose a lot of incredible staff if that was the case.
I love that you call it the old men's club because it is though.
Literally that.
It is. I think it's it's everywhere, the old men's club, particularly in forensics because interestingly you've said, there's a lot of women in forensics, but I was not I didn't study with a lot of females at all. Which was interesting, but in saying that, there's a lot more, I think, as the years progress, encouragement for women, even women, like you said, who want to have kids and take time off, like that's fine. It's great to encourage, and that story is good for so many reasons. I love it, and I'm glad that we put it in right at the end, so we forced everyone to listen and wait. For that specific story, I'm very happy about that.
Oh, no, that's brilliant. But yeah, it's a great case, that one.
So my last question is about CrimeCon. Yes, we don't have anything like that here, which is very sad. And we're trying to, a few of us kind of in the industry are getting together in August, at the end of August, and kind of trying to start one up. Obviously a very small version, but you got to start somewhere, I guess. Tell us about CrimeCon in the UK and your involvement.
So this is going to be my first year at CrimeCon.
Yay.
I think it started a few years ago over in the States, and it's now progressed over here. And I think, we're probably the place in Europe, like the hub in Europe for people to come along. In this event, there are various podcasters there. We're all going to have our stalls and things, so come up, talk to us. But then you have guest speakers as well. And it can be anyone from the true crime genre, so it's not exclusive to podcasters. It can be, say, TV personalities, authors. It's a big 2-day event in London. I believe it is... Oh, you've caught me off guard. I should have done my research. I believe it is the 3rd and 4th of October in London. Come along if you're in the area. I say in the area. You might be across the world.
Yeah.
But they've just had the American one over in Las Vegas.
Yes.
That just looks absolutely
amazing. Doesn't it?
It looks so cool. Next year they're doing it in Orlando.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, it looks very cool. And then when I saw it was going to the UK, I was like, this is awesome. And then I saw that you were going to be there and I was like, that's so cool. So have you got like a bit of a plan? Like, what's the go? Is it kind of like, you're in a stall waiting for people to come and have a chat? Like, what do you guys get to do?
Yeah, so it's basically that. I'm going to have like my table with my stand, all my kind of like free merch that I'm going to give out.
Awesome.
And just talk to people that don't necessarily know that me and the podcast exist. And also, hopefully gain some great connections with other podcasters as well, like I've kind of done with yourself.
I think you will. I think that's such a good opportunity to listen to, you're going to be disappearing out of your own stall and going and chatting with other people while you're there, but it's very cool. So I'm excited to see how that goes for you, if we get some international cases, then we might be there, but who knows?
Yeah. But I think it would be, it's just growing and growing, this event. So perhaps if you've got enough of you over in Australia to start up like an event, then, by all means, like, I'll put you in contact with some people that I know.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Because we have a couple of podcasters. Like you said, it's basically the same. We have, like, an investigative journalist, podcasters. There's so many just really great people doing really good things, and it's so nice to see them come together because, you know, in a lot of industries people are like butting heads and it's not great, but I find this one to be really welcoming and supportive of each other. So that's especially something that I love about CrimeCon, is that like everybody gets to go and do their thing and have a chat, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And I think what I love most about it as well is that you could turn up by yourself, but you wouldn't feel like you're by yourself.
Yes.
Because you have so many people that have that similar interest. And you know what it's like when you're in a room full of people and you think, what kind of icebreaker can I get, or how do I start talking to these people?
Yeah.
But you're all there for a common interest. It's going to be such a cool event.
Yes, and no such thing as like weird conversation starters there too, because like if you talk to someone you don't know who's like, you don't know if they're into true crime and you're like, so Ted Bundy, and they're like, what? Then it's weird. But at that event it'd be great. But I think we'll end it there because I've literally had you for an hour, but I could go on, and I didn't ask you a single question that I wrote down because I'm so just intrigued about all of the things that come with crime scene investigation. Like you have, especially the fire section, I just would imagine it to be, did you find that particularly challenging learning, you know, about evidence collection and things like that with fire-based work?
I think what I probably found more challenging was the science behind it, you know, like the theory. It was going back to school, learning about more physics, chemistry. Really getting that into my head, with evidence collection and things like that, it is a lot trickier than like a normal crime scene that hasn't been burnt to the floor. You can just see the evidence on the floor, you take a picture of it and put it into a bag. Whereas with the fire scene, you think we can't just do that. It is, sometimes days, weeks of just excavating these scenes just to get to that bit of evidence that normally you'd be able to take you 5 minutes to pick up.
Wow, that's crazy. I think so many people are going to love listening to this because it's very niche. And like you said, 1 of 5 people, that's insane. Thank you so much for doing this and having me on your podcast. If people didn't know, we literally did this back to back. So I think we did quite a good job. So thank you so much for agreeing to do it back to back so we could swap. It's been very interesting to learn a lot. Like I feel like you have worked in the industry for so long and seen so much, but at the end of the day, there's still more to learn always, don't you think?
100%.
Yeah.
And like even I see some really, really good investigators now that say someone young will come up and their ideas are just as important as their own because, like you say, it's just evolving so much, forensic science, and it's constantly changing. So you always need to change your mindset and be open to that, I think. Yeah. If that makes sense.
No, it does. That's great. Like I like to say to people that like the highest form of intelligence is being able to change your mind when somebody gives you new evidence, because like you've just constantly got to challenge yourself that way. So I think that's really important. Yeah. But thanks so much for being on our podcast as well.
No, thank you for being on mine too.
I will end it there.